Well, thanks for joining.
Absolutely.
We started this, about a year ago, maybe a little longer. But we've always talked to transportation people. So whether you were in pricing, economics, whatever it was. And so we had this idea to come out and reach out to entrepreneurs because I think it's really cool. I love hearing about the stories, how you got through it, what you grew. So welcome.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Yeah. So you're based in Indy.
Yep.
But I just wanted to hear your story. I'm sure when you get on one, everybody asks your story. So
yeah.
I guess we'll start there. But then I kind of want to just venture all across entrepreneurship.
Happy to do
that
so.
Works. Okay.
Yeah. So I grew up in Indy, born and raised, actually on the northeast side. And we'll get to that later where my businesses are located. But yeah, so grew up, and I always call myself an accidental entrepreneur.
Okay.
I went to Purdue. I was in engineering for a week until I took my first calculus class. And
and
then I was in the business school. Yeah. But I mean, honestly, I was really most active in my fraternity, which is essentially running a small business. And so unbeknownst to me, that was sort of really the training ground that I was getting at the time. I didn't necessarily know that it was going to end up in entrepreneurship. But post-college, started in corporate America. I was terrible at it. But through a fraternity relationship, got an opportunity to work for an entrepreneur.
Okay.
I moved to Cabo in 2004.
Fun place.
It was not the worst place to be post-graduation for about 2 years.
Yeah, so how long were you out of college?
I was a year out of college.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So 04 to 06, I lived in Cabo. Helped run a hotel, helped run a leadership academy for our fraternity. I did everything from interior design to developing an apartment to running bilingual staff meetings.
So is this all for the hotel?
This was for the hotel for this fraternity alumni that I built a relationship with when I was in school. So I just call that my Masters of Entrepreneurship.
Right.
But I came back not necessarily with an application. The joke among the guys that I worked with was that, I won't use the full expression, but from Office Space, when Mike Bolton is talking about Michael Bolton, like a no-talent clown. So we were like just generalists, but yeah, like the no-talent ass clowns. So I came back without a particular application of what I wanted to start a business in. And so I worked in communications and marketing.
Okay.
And my genesis of becoming an accidental entrepreneur was the marketing firm I was at, like a lot of companies in the subprime crisis, really took a hit. So almost went out of business, and I found myself newly married without a job. And so necessity became the mother of invention.
Right.
And so close friend from Purdue and I decided to start a residential HVAC business.
So that's 2009.
Yeah.
Which is a terrible time.
Yeah, as you know.
Which I felt the pain, yeah.
So it was terrible in many ways, but when you're young and dumb and you don't have any overhead, we were opportunistic, and what we didn't know actually helped us because we didn't come in with any baggage of how the operation was supposed to look, what the industry was supposed to look like. All we knew was that the homeowners that we knew didn't like any of the heating and cooling providers that had served them, and we were pretty sure that we could figure out a way to build more trust.
At that point, though, how was financing? Because that was a scary time.
Yeah,
and banks didn't want any part of.
Yeah, so we bootstrapped everything. Nobody was financing us.
Yeah.
Now we were, the customers could get their own financing to some extent if necessary, but prices were a lot less to get the equipment. There were sort of incentives from the government at that point for high efficiency systems. And so we didn't know that we were in actually a pretty good time as far as the marketplace was concerned to start a business. But as I said, we benefited from our ignorance. We were, again, young and dumb and didn't really have a business plan, but we felt like we could create a better brand. And so that was really the genesis of that business.
So when you guys set out to do this, what did that look like on a plan? So you said you didn't have a plan, but
no.
You had some kind of a...
it was as simple as we thought there was room in the marketplace for someone that sounded a little different, acted with a little bit more integrity, and just really put the customer first. It was simplistic from a marketing perspective. And they were like, we can find technicians to do this work. And candidly, the marketing in the space, which is my sort of technical background, if anything, wasn't that great, wasn't that sophisticated, and a lot of them selling on a lot of features and benefits, bells and whistles that customers don't really understand. Right. High efficiency doesn't actually mean much to anyone.
Right.
And so we were just, with the sensibility of a homeowner, we really sold through and marketed through that lens of what do people actually want. And so again, it wasn't super sophisticated, but as I think you've experienced, it's like what we had was just necessity and pretty dogged persistence out of the gate. And so that sort of makes up for a lot of misses or a lot of like gaps in a business plan.
Yeah, the persistence probably is key, especially early on because you don't have a budget.
No budget.
Zero marketing.
Yeah. I mean, so we benefited from, frankly, there was not a lot of options in the market for us to sort of off-ramps and other things. So the ships were burnt on our behalf in a lot of ways.
It helps.
Oh, absolutely. So it took us 2 or 3 years to really find product market fit and start to get systems that could scale. But we did eventually, and we're able to bring in talent and bring in teams to actually run the technical side, because we still don't have that. And as I shared with your team, and we can get into the specifics of this, but we actually exited that about 5 weeks ago.
Oh,
and so
congrats.
Yeah, so that was about a year or so in the making, and sold to a local family office. So really got a great valuation and joining a great team.
That's a fun part of the experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
What was day one like? People always ask, like, what happened on that first day?
Yeah.
I can always go back to that day. Like, I got to work at 4 a.m. The heat wasn't on. There's no coffee machine. I had a dorm fridge.
That's great.
What did you guys look like?
Yeah, no office, no vehicles, no insurance. We had 1099 technicians, so we weren't even.
Did you have one?
We had one technician that my business partner had worked with from Craigslist. What we had were like relationships that trusted us. And so the first service calls that we went out on, I actually went out with our technician because I didn't even know what the process looked like. So I didn't know how to market that process to homeowners.
So do you guys have uniforms at that point?
No uniforms. We had a website and a brand and business card and some, social capital.
Yeah.
Again, when people ask about it, I'm like, I don't recommend how we did it, bootstrapping, but the benefit was we learned every piece of the process from the ground up. And over time, that allowed our system to be pretty tight because we knew why each piece was in the system. And when you're the one that sort of formed it,
right.
Sort of the pieces and parts. And so that enabled us to hand off those batons and hire people well and ask good questions in the interview process. So, it was a great business to have. We joined a great team. We're still minority owners, so we still like the business. We were just ready to kind of move our sights on other things. Yeah.
Yeah, I never forget the first day I went and bought business cards at Kinko's.
Yeah.
I remember back in the day, I was walking out and my hand hit them. We had a meeting in Chicago, and I knocked the ink off. So I took the cards and threw them in the trash can. I'm like, it'll make me better. I can't give anything out. Like, it was terrible. We made a trifold that was terrible.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I still have it today. Like,
that's great.
I never gave it to him. I'm like, I couldn't hand this thing out. It was terrible.
I just believe that that's how it has to be formed. I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs now, both in our co-working space that we'll talk about, and then in general, just sort of helping entrepreneurs. I think there's sort of a misnomer that businesses like yours come into the world fully formed.
Oh my God.
And it's all trial and error and failing forward and creating the Kinko's business cards that's junk. And it's like, again, so that you know why you spend the extra money to get the card that doesn't bleed. And you print the trifold that nobody responds to change your messaging. So I just always encourage people, like, the sort of lean startup strategy where it's like start, fail, iterate, like improve. Yeah. And most people, again, I think it's fear, perception, whatever the sort of head trash is, but it's like all the while they're trying to perfect what it is they're trying to launch with. It's like, you would be better off just starting and iterating. So again, I appreciate your story.
How often did you look at other entrepreneurs of bigger businesses and think, man, everything's perfect? They have the answers, and like, there's that misconception. I think a lot of times, like, people coming up, and that you have to be perfect, and actually, it's furthest from the truth. Like,
There's definitely, I would say I try to learn from and study the like successes in business. I think when we jumped into HVAC, we were really clear that there was a lot in the industry we didn't like. And so if there was sort of a studying other businesses, it was a lot of times businesses in disparate industries. So, I always say things like, I aspire to look and feel like an Apple store, but happen to be in HVAC. And rightly or wrongly, I always subscribed to kind of pithy leadership quotes, but one was by John Wooden, who is, I don't know if the story is apocryphal or not, but was said to have said that he never scouted other teams, believing that if his team performed to their ability, didn't matter what the other team was doing. And so you can only kind of control the controllables. And so that's how we tried to operate, was just kind of sticking to what we could control and how we, approached the market and how we served our customers and just kind of letting other people be how they were. And so that's just always been sort of a disposition and a philosophy, I guess, just sort of let the competition be that. I don't have anything negative to say about most of my competition. There are ones that I actually think do great work. The great thing is like the pie is big enough. So I'd rather just, focus on being great at what we can do and then, let them chase us if they need to.
What do you think is looking back to 2009 to an exit?
Yeah.
And if you go back in the first 5 to 10 years, somebody asked me this the other day, what would you do different?
Oh, that's great.
Is there anything that you can point to? Because it's not easy to answer, but
yeah,
there's probably several things that you would change.
Yeah.
Is there any general
some good principles
areas
there.
or principles that you would have changed?
Yeah, this is going to be so cliche, but I would have concentrated on the people and the hiring process. I mean, most of our mistakes can be derived back to hired the wrong person. I was too quick to hire. And again, every industry has a degree of this, but we are just notoriously known for a labor market shortage. And so there's definitely the times where it's like, hey, it's busy. Can you fog a mirror? Do you have an EPA certification? All right, you're in the truck. And so
sign them up.
The long-term consequences of being short-sighted on the team, I think, are the biggest impacts. So much of our P&L issues, if we ever had them, you could draw a direct line back to, we put the wrong person in the truck. And and I think over time, what we got better at was recognizing that our intuition was telling us what to do, and then we would sort of rationalize what we thought we should do in the moment. But I think it's, again, somewhat cliche, but it's I think over time our gut got clearer and smarter, and we learned to trust it more. And we learned that whatever short-term benefit we might get from putting this wrong person in the truck, it's going to cost us more pretty quickly, not even in the long run, certainly in the long run, but oftentimes the next week. So I would say that's the singular thing that we would have done different, better, concentrated more on, and frankly, paid more, faster, increased benefits faster, figured out how to sort of increase pricing if necessary to do that. But the team with the most talent wins. It's sort of an inevitable reality in all businesses.
I would agree with probably that it's the hiring early on, but being bootstrapped is in and of itself is another challenge. Because the things you talked about, you could look back in the day,
sure,
people at Google were riding bikes around, and we're sitting in a dingy office on phones, so that's hard. How do you, something that I've always questioned, there's a saying that says, don't work in the business.
Yeah.
Work on the business.
Yeah.
How would you suggest, how do entrepreneurs actually really do that? Because you were on a 16-year journey to get where you were today.
Yeah, we benefited from the fact that neither of us were technicians. So we had to work on the business. Theoretically, we could have tried to get the technical licensing, but that's just not my gifting. So we benefited early and consistently from being forced to work on the business out of the gate. that's a challenge that you pointed out. We walk with a lot of the entrepreneurs in our co-working space that when you're a practitioner founder, you can always do it better, at least in your mind, that's the case. And so and I think especially when we get pressed into like challenging areas, again, it's like the inevitable running up against payroll and you're short. So we all tend to, I think, default to our biggest areas of strength. And oftentimes the practitioner founder, who is the plumber who started the plumbing business, he or she's always going to be most comfortable jumping in the truck and going to fix the thing. And again, that's the inherent challenge of when you work in the business. Like, you can't pull back, work on systems, think about strategy, think about how are we actually budgeting to scale. Again, there's no secret sauce other than recognizing like when you're actually doing the role of something that you've hired for, that's probably an issue.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or it's, I mean, I think for some people, it's a recognition of like, what is it they want out of their business? It's totally okay and defensible for people to work in their business if they don't want to have a high scale business. I know of lawyers that consciously don't scale because they want to serve clients well and they don't want to just dish it off to an associate. And just sort of check boxes, after the fact. They want to deliver a service quality that they believe they're the only ones that can do. And so, again, I think in the absence of a specific imagination of what you want your business to be and look like, the default is more and bigger, which isn't bad by any means. But I think too often founders and entrepreneurs find themselves in this like, well, we have to grow. And when pressed, they're like, well, I don't know why, but that's just what we're supposed to do, right?
Or how.
So I would say there's the question before in the business, on the business is like, what's your actual vision and why? Because again, it's totally defensible to work in your business. If you want to have a 5-person team and you want to be really precise around quality and you don't want to have huge scale. Now, granted, you're not going to get some of the benefits of scale and flexibility and autonomy that others that have been able to produce scale get. But again, I think it's just a recognition of there's trade-offs but if someone is in that place where they want to scale and they find themselves doing, I think that, the only way I found to do it is like when you have to find margin somewhere, oftentimes it comes, on the weekends, in the evenings.
On finding margin.
Yeah, and finding somebody who can give you objectivity. And that's, again, one of the things that we try to provide in our co-working space is like outside advice from people that have done it to help people get beyond sort of their limiting self-beliefs oftentimes or the principles or paradigms that they're operating within at the time. And so, again, no secret sauce other than like having a plan and then working a plan. But yeah, the signal is like, if you're doing something that you're paying somebody else to do, you're probably not doing it right. Yeah,
that is always a sign.
Yeah,
when you're stepping in that role and doing it, it's draining.
Yeah,
because
totally.
you want to be everywhere.
Yeah,
to help it, man. There's not even hours in a day.
No,
to do the things that have to be done.
And I think that's okay too. One of the other things we try to do is, again, it's not just like giving grace for grace's sake, but it's like, hey, this is really hard. The classic like, if it was easy, everybody would do this. Right. So it's like that it's hard is like the classic feature, not a bug. And it's like it's through hard that actually is the forcing mechanism to figure out the right path. Right. So again, I think oftentimes it's like I'd say the lie oftentimes that founders can tell themselves is like, this should be easier. And it's like, no, it shouldn't. It should be hard. Like you're trying to figure out how to scale something with a bunch of competition and produce profit. And like the vision is hard to accomplish. That there are constraints is, again, a feature, not a bug. And the constraints produce the creative outcomes that actually can get the goals eventually.
Constraints mold you.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's how you create, gives you that edge. Like,
yeah,
it's made us so many times. We've like, what the heck are we going to do?
Yeah.
The world's collapsing. The government, it's a mess.
Yeah.
The economy's a mess. And like you create, and it helps you scale better.
Yeah.
Helped us scale.
And we get a choice. Again, right now we're in this sort of uncertainty around what the macro reality is going to look like. And it's like, which gives a totally justifiable excuse if you're looking for one.
Right.
Or it's a constraint that produces creativity that causes you to be better than your competition. Yeah, absolutely.
What did year one, the end of year one, when you sit down, is there ever a moment, like for us, I'll never forget, it was Christmas Eve or it was New Year's Eve. We were sitting in a dingy office, just tired, so tired. And I remember like my wife and his wife, they'd come home, it's time to come home. It was like 8 o'clock at night. And we walked down to a little corner bar and just had a drink and then looked at each other like, geez, oh man, our W-2s were terrible. Like, did you guys have a moment like where you sat down at the end of that first year and like, what does this business really look like and what do we want it to be?
Yeah, I think it wasn't necessarily as organized as a year-end review. It was just the periodic sort of conversations of like, what the heck are we doing here? And again, I think I go back to that sort of persistence was really the benefit ultimately. But yeah, I mean, we would do like an annual trip up to Chicago, and that was sort of our quasi year-end review. I mean, there were some moments of like, feeling pretty desperate of like, I think, you had asked the question earlier around looking at competition. I think for me, the sort of comparison trap was looking at friends that had taken a more conventional path, and like they were taking better vacations for a while. Just
enjoying life.
Yeah, there was just a sense of enjoyment that wasn't part of my reality for a good, 3 or 4 years, especially. And so I think I benefited from partnership in life with my wife and in business with my business partner. And I needed that collaboration of like when it seemed almost inevitable, but like when I was down, he was up. And kind of when kind of you couldn't see your way out of like the sort of dark hallway, it's like, hey, I can show you the way. So I'm a big believer that I honestly don't know how solopreneurs do it without sort of losing their mind, because inevitably life looks like, in business or not, just like peaks and troughs. I say like everybody wants the sort of top, up to the right linear progression of life.
Yeah.
But it looks more like an EKG, and growth looks like, is your this trough a little higher than your last trough? Yeah. Okay, you're growing. And so for me, it's been an essential quality to have a partner to walk alongside when inevitably in those sort of review times, it's like, what the heck are we doing? Are we doing the right thing here? Because trade-offs. That's the challenge. Like I could be doing something different.
It is real. Like I can remember watching family, friends. They're out enjoying holidays. I was at work, Mother's Day at work. And you look at it like, what am I doing?
And it's tough to. Again, I like sort of analogies from agriculture a lot when it comes to business growth, where it's like when you're the seed planted below the ground, it's tough to imagine that you're going to bear fruit someday. Because all you can see is darkness around you.
There's a high chance you're not.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. When you know the facts and figures out there, for sure. So, yeah, again, that's where I think, I'm such a believer in entrepreneurship for a multitude of reasons. I mean, you guys are employing, 600 plus people. Yeah. I mean, that's incredible with something that didn't exist 15 years ago. Right. And stepped into a gap in the marketplace that had you not done, people wouldn't be served as well. And this is just sort of the engine that America produces, where it's like people willing to take risks, to have those years potentially doing the work on the days nobody wants to work, not knowing if there's going to be benefits on the other side. Again, like the fruit is not inevitable. In fact, like it's more unlikely than it is likely. And so I just think like that's how you produce opportunity and dynamism and jobs and like a more fruitful community. And the foundation is always someone taking a risk and putting in the work. So I'm grateful for what you guys have done.
I think one of my come to Jesus moments was I was walking down the stairs. We have another office at 141. Yeah. And it's 2 floors, the sales floors. And I was walking down, everybody's like, they call me Ace, like Ace. And there's probably 10 of our employees standing, looking in. We have a hallway that we share with District Tap. Yeah. a doorway, and there's a homeless man that had just used the restroom on the floor. And we had a customer coming in like 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and they're looking at me, and they're looking at him, and they're looking at me. Like, well, no one's moving, so I got to move. So I had to run down, get him out, and I had to clean it up and dump coffee grounds. And
Yeah. There's those moments.
There's those moments you're like, oh my, yeah, this is.
Well, again, my version of that was, when a install helper would call in sick, and somebody's got to help on the install. Who's going to run the refrigerant lines between the outdoor unit and the indoor unit?
Right.
Well, it's the small guy. So, I'm 30 years old, and
and not a technician.
Not a technician, and here I am rolling out copper refrigerant lines in somebody's crawl space. I just find it's like you can lament those moments or recognize that those are the contributions that it takes and the humbling that it takes. And when you're willing to do anything, I don't think it's I don't think it's random or just accidental that you guys have had the success because you were willing to do that. You looked around and didn't see anybody else jumping on it. I think those moments are critical in the story of businesses that are successful.
Because you guys started in your industry at that time. In Indianapolis, there's probably several providers.
Oh, yeah, hundreds.
And so when you go out to start, I was curious, and the reason you're here today is you started in a red ocean.
Yeah.
How did you pick a strategy as an entrepreneur? Because a lot of times people will say, like, if it's a red ocean, stay away. But for us, my partner and I were like, let's jump into a red ocean.
Sure.
And we're very picky on what we did. So I was curious, how did you do that? Build a culture from nothing.
Yeah. I mean, I hit on a little bit, but I think it went back to our experience and many of our friends' experiences with other service providers. And what time and again was told to us was that they just didn't trust a lot of the companies that came into their homes. And so we just felt like that was something where, we couldn't necessarily hang our hat on being better technically, let's say, out of the gate. We believed that we could control our integrity. And if ultimately, like, that's the foundation of what people wanted was just somebody that they could trust, we can compete and win on that front. And so it was a red ocean in terms of competition and people doing the same thing. But for a good half decade, nobody was really talking about trust. And we benefited as well from being a little bit ahead of the curve on digital marketing. So we were communicating a different message through a different medium, and that really helped accelerate our early growth. And intentionally, just from an aesthetic, we wanted to look and feel like a tech company. So where everybody else was sort of bombarding customers with messages, you get something in the mail, and it's just, as I said earlier, like benefit, feature, like half of which was in jargon. We just used very clear language, a lot of white space, real simplified messaging. And so we started with, we're going to build a brand first, and it's going to be around trust. And then over time, we really, as I'm sure you've experienced, is like you just operationalize what that looks like in detail. And so that's where it was like, hire people that also believe in this. Do things like when everybody else is going 24/7, don't go 24/7, because like you're going to be able to recruit technicians that want to have work-life balance and are probably going to have shared values. And so we just layered in those things that just created more and more sort of moats around how we were doing things. And again, it's not perfect. And as I said, we've got a number of great competitors in the space, but again, we didn't know it was going to work. We just believed that, that was something that we could control, and our trust and our integrity.
Yeah. If you think about, you just said something about patterns, and I always believe that sales and business is all about patterns.
Yeah.
Watch them do the opposite. How did you guys work that into the business? So that example, you said they were working 24/7. Mm-hmm. Did you market that different to just internally to employees to get the ones that didn't want that, or did it improve your operational cost versus theirs?
No, I mean, it hurt us in the short run financially to not run 24/7. Our belief, though, again, no knock if you found yourself here, anyone listening, but like we just made the calculus that like a customer that wanted someone in their house at 3 a.m. was a customer we were happy to give to another competitor. History proved out that like somebody who had that demand was going to be demanding during regular work hours. And so we just made the choice that for our team, our first customer was our team. And this is sort of a concept we stole from Starbucks, which was just like, if we serve our first customer well, they will in turn serve the other customers well. And so, yeah, we would market on that. As you said, like, recognize patterns and zig where everyone else is zagging. And again, it's not necessarily the same as, going into a blue ocean per se, but it's just creating differentiation. And again, going back to that belief that it all comes back to people. If you can differentiate with your team, that's going to help you differentiate with your customer, especially in a service business like ours, where it's not necessarily products are pretty tough to differentiate on. There's different brands, but the warranties are virtually the same. And so, price, is not a long-term way to differentiate from other customers or other competition rather. And so, yeah, the team is what it all came back to for us. And that's what we really built around. And again, I think it's challenging though when the competition can sometimes pay more because they're given more hours, but we just over the years would pick up one or two guys and we just didn't lose them because they experienced something different. Right. Anybody can get someone in the door, but you have to like follow through over time.
Keep them in the door is key.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is, I think, is one of the hardest things for a bootstrap startup. I mean, we stunk.
Yeah.
It was tough, really tough.
Yeah.
You learn a lot.
Yeah.
There was a question asked to me. I was at a university, and the question was, is there such thing as work-life balance? I have a different answer than everybody or people, but what's your take? If you're an entrepreneur, can you really achieve work-life balance? If you're bootstrapped, you're in a red ocean, you're starting in a recession.
Yeah,
did it exist?
I think in that sort of initial entrepreneurial phase, I don't know that it can. I mean, I don't know how you go like the classic like J curve of a business where you go below the line and you're bootstrapped and you're figuring whether you're bootstrapped or you're funded, kind of the J curve of a business cycle. It's like you go below the line and that creates the constraints and you're having to figure out how do you find product market fit while you're strapped for time and resources. And as I said earlier, and you agreed, like the constraints are what produce actually the sort of building blocks of what produces the scale. So I think, if you're a founder and you're at that early phase, the first 3 to 5 years, I just don't know how you find that. Now, it doesn't mean you can't want that for your team, and everyone's making choices whether or not they want to be a founder, be an employee. And so I think a mistake founders make at times is when they export their personal philosophy onto everyone else and expect that to be sort of the cultural norm. And I think that can work directly against that earlier comment around recruiting the best people. When it's like, when you don't recognize, it's like, no, if they wanted to be an entrepreneur, they would have chosen that path. They want to be an employee. So it's like, anyway, I think that can sometimes be the toughest balance for an entrepreneur is that when we've done the hard work and we're willing to clean up, from the homeless guy, like that everybody else doesn't have that same instinct. So it just takes a little bit of reflection and self-awareness to recognize, like, nope, that I can't export what I'm willing to do on everybody else. Right. At least that's my belief.
Yeah, 'cause I think entrepreneurship is my definition is more a person that wants to fix a process.
Yes, I think that's right.
And if you hire a bunch of entrepreneurs within the company, they're all It's neat to see our company watching some of these people today, the things they create and do. It's like, that gets me excited.
Yeah, that would.
Watch.
And I think that has to be something that is, one, culturally clarified, and then secondarily operationalized with a degree of autonomy. I think, again, it's easy to put it on the wall. It's way harder to back off and let somebody have the white space to try and fail within their role. So, again, kudos to you guys if you can find that balance between, like, a system that can scale, but also freedom to run and make some mistakes on their own. Most business cultures tend to get pulled in one or the other direction, oftentimes, especially as you're scaling to that command and control system. That's why, I mean, obviously this is kind of touches on your space to some extent. I will like sing the praises of the capacity for Amazon to scale and stay creative and innovative. To be employing 1 million plus people and still innovating is an insane balance to walk. And it's a huge
Scaling's
tightrope.
hard. It's probably that. I'll never forget the day before, about 5 days before we started. Yeah. My partner and I met a guy who was an entrepreneur here, built a large business, and we were asking him, and I remember him looking at us saying, "Man, you idiots are getting into this." So he goes, "I honestly feel bad for you." But we were so ambitious and ready to go. Yeah. And one of the things he said by the end, like, stay small. He's like, you need to stay small. You'll thank me for it later. I remember us, we were like, no, we're going. We're going full out. But when you get to different levels, when you get to 100 million, when you get to 500 million, when you get to, it's everything changes. And the way you roll out processes it's tough. I mean, it's one of the hardest things. So you do more than just HVAC. You started consulting?
We do some of that, some advisory work. And
with,
then we
with entrepreneurs?
Yeah, with entrepreneurs, that's a pretty widespread, the advisory business. That's been a recent manifestation. Okay. The sort of thing in the middle was starting a co-working space.
Okay. And what year was that?
That was 2017, 18.
So at the time, so what made you do that?
It was a natural evolution. So we had the HVAC business. We wanted a space to sort of put roots down. We bought a building too big for us. So we had about 28,000 square feet that we weren't using for our business. And so at the time, there were 2 co-working spaces in town, Speakeasy and Launch Fishers. And so, again, it was like, all right, well, we liked that model. We loved the cultural experience of those spaces. We just felt like they weren't built for businesses like ours. So our pretty simplistic launch of that was, well, let's take that sort of environmental, cultural feel, but focus it toward unsexy businesses like ours. And so we're right around 46th and Keystone. Thankfully, finally, the Nickel Plate Trail has been paved. It's been nothing as long as we've owned the facility until this year. So that's going to hopefully bring some more walking along the trail right where we're at. But 30,000 square feet. We have about 100 members, all from like solopreneurs with no office, just classic co-working, to we have a mortgage business that has, 50 people and 3,000 square feet. So it's a pretty widespread office, and we've got a microbrewery called Black Circle in the space. So it's kind of a hodgepodge. The city likes the fact that we have all these different zoning variances. No, they don't at all.
So how is that running that compared to the HVAC? I mean, or how do you have time, I guess, one?
Well, gratefully, with the exit, more time. But we had slowly, as we grew, I would say you wear every hat when you start, and then you take off the hats that you either don't like or are uncomfortable. And so over the years progressed, we took off all the hats, and by around 2017, 18, we had a GM in place, and my business partner and I were really sort of strategic owners rather than being in the business. And so then that gave us some more margin to work on the co-working space, got that redeveloped. We did that ourselves, and then bootstrapped that to launch. And so I was sort of leasing agent, marketer, community manager. Brandon helped me with a little bit of that over the years as well. So we kind of pieced that together. But so it was this natural evolution into that opportunity. And then we just talked to people that we knew, and that sort of, co-working space for unsexy businesses, again, that sort of vibe really played to a lot of people. And so we, as I said, we still sort of have the focus with trades, home services, folks in real estate, but we've added on more professional services and nonprofits as well in that space. And that's really been fun to have this outlet for those first decade or so of running the HVAC business. So that's been sort of this way for me to, especially to like sit down and give back and help support those startups.
Do you get to interact with them much? The people in the space?
Yeah, I mean, we do a combination of organized events where it is sort of theme-driven or industry-driven. And again, this has been evolutionary. We've tried a lot of different ways to, support can look a lot of different ways, especially with bootstrapped entrepreneurs, as we've been discussing. It's not like they have huge volume of time to like devote to non-essential activities. Right. And so it's forced us to be very sort of focused and potent with the activities that we do. And then there's sort of the ad hoc emergency type of things where you get pulled into a half an hour whiteboarding session and some state of duress. And so I actually like the sort of triage work as much as the sort of the planned, sort of organized, thematically driven cohorts are fine. Oftentimes I find like the polish is it's fine. It's not as potent sometimes as the person who's like, how do we solve this crisis? I find that's a ton of fun.
And watch it transform.
Oh yeah.
To give them advice.
Yeah, and to really see, I mean, again, some of it is just like the probably the physiology of like in businesses, and I'm sure you can relate to this, like there's a ton of delayed gratification. The opportunities for immediate gratification get smaller and smaller. So to like go into a business and like solve something, and then the next day they're like, crisis averted. There really is this like serotonin drip that I probably get from that. It's the same reason I like mowing my lawn. It's like I can see it completed, and I'm like, I've accomplished something. Because like a lot of the progression of business growth is like incremental consistency, and you can't tell progress. I mean, that's why we track so many data points, because like your like visibility to growth is so difficult. I mean, I can't even imagine a business your size.
Well, it takes time too, and having purpose.
Yeah.
If you don't have purpose, it's hard. And I've learned too, like a year, 12 months is nothing. Yeah. I go nuts around March. I'm like, look how much of the year's gone. What are we gonna do? Like, and I'm telling them now, like it's almost June. We're planning for next February.
Yeah. It's insane how fast it goes.
It goes so fast.
Yeah.
16 years in, it's like, man, slow it down. If somebody's thinking about starting a business, and they came to you,
absolutely,
what advice would you give them?
Oh man,
taking your experiences.
Yeah, I mean, I touched on it earlier. Again, there's situational realities that I try to really explore with somebody. So a lot of times, this is a lot of the conversations I have. It's mid-career folks, and they have this itch that they think they want to be a founder. They want to buy a business or something like that. And so I think we benefited from the fact that we didn't have any options. Now it's like, I'm big on like, if you're 25 and you don't have strings attached and you have an inkling towards something, go and do and iterate and bootstrap. If you've got a wife and a kid, there's a responsible way to do it. So I'm rarely going to be like, like burn the ships and jump in. So I'm a big believer in like, trust your nudges, leverage experience where you can. The data points to the best or the highest likelihood of startup success. The age is around 42. And why that is that oftentimes somebody 20 years into their career actually knows where there's a gap in the marketplace that there's going to be buyers for.
Right.
And also like, don't fall in love with your idea. Test your idea. I was alluding to this earlier. I think the biggest mistake I see is that people that think they have to think their way to the end. And I would say almost no business, if not no business I've ever heard of, comes into the world fully formed. It's always this sort of iteration, the classic
constant.
The classic Edison quote about like, I didn't, failed 99 times or whatever. Yeah. I found 99 ways a light bulb wouldn't work or whatever the quote is. That's how it happens. So I'm big on like, keep your day job, communicate with your partner, let's say, your wife or whatever. It's like, and give yourself X amount of margin, and then try and test and see if your idea actually has a market for it. Right. Again, too often it's this thinking that like you need to go fully all in, you need to raise capital. It's like, no, just see if somebody's willing to buy your idea, because until you have a customer, like you don't have a business.
Right. I always tell them, put the boat in the water.
Yeah.
Then build an oar or figure out how to sail later. But it's been interesting watching, like we developed tech. So when we started our tech program 8 years ago, we wanted to differentiate, lower our cost to serve, and make our service different. everybody that we talked to said, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. And thank God we didn't listen. But the first evolution of that product to today
Yeah.
is so different.
Yeah.
And the blood, sweat, and tears that went into it.
Yeah. And again, but you wouldn't be here if you didn't start there.
If we didn't do that, yeah.
Yeah.
But that to the point of it's that constant sharpening, that
Yeah,
constant
absolutely.
hitting up against something that's really, really, really tough.
Yeah.
It's not easy. When you think of companies that fail, which happens,
Yeah.
was it 90-some% fail? What do you think are the top 1, 2, 3 things that you can point to that somebody should avoid?
Yeah. I mean, again, I think you can be successful in any industry. I mean, I think it's the inverse of some of these things I'm talking about. It's this belief that, analysis paralysis, thinking you have to perfect everything before you go to market instead of just going to market with some sort of offering and then that sort of capacity to continue to iterate. I think starting with faulty expectations. We knew somebody a few years ago that I knew it was going to fail when one of the partners communicated that their plan was to retire in 5 years. It was like,
Maybe.
I know you're not publicly traded, but how can I short your stock?
Yeah.
So again, it's not like the quintessential, it's not rocket science. It's just like, if you go in knowing it's going to be hard work, if you have that long aperture of time to success, and really it's like the financial piece, there's a necessary minimum. I think a lot of times, like, that's the many of the owners that I know, like, that at a long point ago has like ceased to be the motivation. There is some, this is sort of cliche, but like there's some abiding why or purpose that is the motivator,
Right.
well beyond something financial.
It's not money.
Yeah.
If money drives you, you're going to
Yeah.
die.
Yeah,
There's
absolutely.
no way. I mean, it hurts too much.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I'd like start with a low cost of living, low expectations, and then the high expectation of that it's going to take a lot of work. And then it's like, all right, then you're probably going to have a higher likelihood of success. But so the inverse of those things are, I think, what kill most businesses.
The sale process.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can talk about it.
Yeah, yeah.
How was that for you? How did it play out? And what was, I guess before that, what was the driving force to say maybe now is the time?
Yeah. I mean, for a few years, now I can look back, when your heart's not in anymore. I thrive in the founder phase. I love the creative process of the early unknowns. Shamefully, in a lot of ways, I say like, right when the business starts to become profitable is about the time I get disinterested, because then you're actually just kind of on the pathway toward higher efficiency. Most of your system, the core system, is in place. Yeah. And so I probably knew, but was not conscious of 5 years ago. But over the last kind of the post-COVID era, we had, we hit a ceiling and we just could not iterate our way through it in terms of scaling to the next level. And so it was a combination of that, plus losing kind of the heart for it. I just knew like the problems that we were solving, like when I'd walk into the building, I would walk to the co-working problems and not the HVAC problems.
There is a feeling of that startup with that rush almost every single day.
Yeah.
Like you don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, I love that, the newness. It's part of why I like the whiteboarding sessions with the small businesses that are in some state of duress. So that was there. And then my business partner got married, moved to Lexington, Kentucky. So the stack of all those things, that sort of got us to the posture of being open to it. But and I have to be somewhat vague about the specifics, but we got introduced to a PE firm out of Cincinnati, not who we ended up selling with, or to rather. But they were very clear that they were pursuing a platform business in Cincinnati, and they weren't going to expand on that vision until into other geographies until they got that one sold or purchased first. And so it gave us this window of time where there was limited pressure, where we could just have a conversation
on your own terms.
On our own terms, and they were just wildly transparent with all the ways it can work. And because we had low pressure and they weren't making an offer and we weren't selling, it just gave us this sort of cliff notes of like education on all the different ways it could work. And then my business partner and I got to the end of kind of that dialogue, and it was like, we want to do that. I think we were sort of stuck in this myopic in or out, and these guys were just, and again, helped educate us on the myriad ways in which it can look. And so when we started a more sort of organized process, we had a pretty clear sense of what we were looking for in terms of not just valuation, but like our continued involvement, roles, advisory roles, what we wanted for our team. They just gave us the freedom, those earlier conversations, to ask all the questions because we knew we weren't even negotiating yet. So anyway, we were lucky enough to have about 5 interested parties, which helped in getting a really great deal. And then, as I said earlier, ultimately landed with a local family office that has other service businesses. And so, yeah, that's a business called B&W that's been in the city for about 50 years.
Wow.
And so Homesense will be their HVAC division, and then B&W Plumbing and Electrical. So it's a really cool marriage where they have a deep operational expertise, and our guys are super strong on that, but our sales and marketing was really our sort of lead. So I think the teams are going to converge really well, and we were grateful to end up with them, and we're excited about what it's going to mean for the future. And we really think, again, to your earlier questions about differentiation and kind of blue ocean, red ocean, I think in an era where there's so much private equity consolidating so many businesses, we're really going to press into the local ownership piece even more than we already have. And we think that's going to have a lot of traction with the marketplace as we grow. Was it bittersweet?
To the day it's done, you sign the paper. Is that hard?
It was strange. I was in the Denver airport, so it felt very even stranger. Sitting with my daughter, I'm like, well, I just sold Homesense, and my wife and I are pretty open with our kids, so she knew it was coming down the pipeline. But she was like, just by pressing those buttons, I was like, yeah, isn't that weird? So I think I shared this with another friend who sold in the last handful of years, and I was like, I don't know what I anticipated, but like I didn't it wasn't this like, I think to your point, bittersweet. It wasn't this like, I feel like popping a bottle of champagne.
Yeah.
I think there is and was a little bit of a grieving process.
Oh, God.
Because it's been this sort of central figure in my life for a good decade and a half. That's, I think, where I'm grateful to still be a part of it so I can still contribute. But ultimately, it's like how I imagine, when your kid goes off to college, which it sounds like it's coming down the pipeline.
Yeah, a couple times now.
Where it's like, it's a necessary part of growth to like let go and sort of, that, having, kind of a balance between the positive and negative is the natural human reaction. So now I think so much of our peace of mind and excitement is around the team that we ended up partnering with, and that we get to be a part of the future flourishing.
Well, congrats. That's
Thank
awesome.
you. Thank you.
What's next?
That's always the question. The biggest surprise in 25 for me was that way after what is age appropriate, my wife and I are expecting another kid.
Congrats. It's exciting.
And so yeah, it is exciting. We are excited and terrified. And so that's the main thing. I'm going to just like mentally prepare for being a 45-year-old.
Start over again.
Like learn it again for the first time.
Yeah.
My joke has been like, it's been so long that like all of the gear that we used is now been taken off the market.
It's obsolete.
It's not obsolete.
Safe.
Yeah, that's what it like. All of the things. Yeah. It's like, no, sorry. Like, you probably had a good chance of killing your previous kids. We've taken this off the market, which is just ridiculous. So, we have a great attitude about it. And what's actually pretty fun is that our older two, they're 13 and 11, and so they're fired up for the process.
Heck yeah. They're going to be so excited.
Yeah, and they're going to be put to work as well, which is going to be good for them.
You have babysitters.
Yeah, that's the hope. That's
the key. Yeah. Well, thanks a lot.
Yeah, this has been fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.